Hi, everybody. I'm Samantha Power. I had the privilege of serving as Barack Obama's ambassador to the United Nations, representing the United States, of course, and have been nominated recently by President Joe Biden to run USAID. And I'm awaiting, I'm hopeful that that will happen at some point and that I will get through Senate confirmation and be in a position to run the world's largest development agency. But in so doing, if I have the chance to do so, one of the people that I will take inspiration from and will learn from is our special guest today, the CEO of the Shining Hope for Communities, Kennedy Odede. And Kennedy, it's great to be with you. As you know, USAID is a massive agency with programs and people fanned out all around the world. There's a big debate in global aid right now about localization and about the importance of ensuring that it is grassroots engagement, activism, programming that drives development in communities, because that'll make it much more sustainable. When you're building programs that are going to benefit your neighbors, people you grew up with, the motivation is different. And the connections and the ability to enlist large communities and vast array of stakeholders is obviously much greater than when it's an outsider coming in and seeking to make a difference. So I'd love to dig into all of that with you. But before we do, I'd love our audience to know where you come from and how you got involved in the very communities where you grew up and put this kind of now jargony word localization into effect. What's your local? Where did you come from and how'd you get into this?
Thank you so much, Ambassador, first of all, for giving us the opportunity and believing in the power of community in the grassroots. So I'm happy to have you. And I have one thing about you, that many things that I love, that during Ebola outbreak, you really played a very strong role on ensuring, and you admire how communities were coming together to fight Ebola. So I remember that about you. So thank you. Anyway, so I come from Kibera Slum, and I grew up in that poverty. And as a very early age, I have to run away from the house and be a homeless kid at the age of 10. And I saw what it means when things cannot go down. So there I gave up on my life. And then one day I got a book from a priest, and I learned a story about this man called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm like, wow. I really think about myself, of poor, and this guy was about community, honestly. So anyway, at around age 15, I went back to my community and I started becoming organizer. And the idea that if we come together, we can solve our own problems. But Ambassador, it was tough, because you are told what's the data, what do you know, where you're educated, and nobody wants to listen to us. But somehow I got lucky, I got American scholarships, I came to the state. So that's why my life became different. So up to then, I believe that for real change to happen, you have to involve people living there. You know, they're the one near the problem, so they can solve it better. But all the time, Ambassador, they get forgotten. So that's why I came to this idea of, why can we bring in people together, those leaders, to have one voice? So Shofco now serves over 2.4 million people. We have really just grown from a soccer ball. I remember for Dr. King was a small church. For me, it was a small soccer ball. But people love football and soccer in my community. That became the drive. And when community are in, oh my God, you see that magic. Yes, that's my story.
That sort of scratches the surface. I want to dig in a little more if I can. So just knowing that people who are joining us today come from all walks of life, all stratas, all parts of the world, perhaps. Could you say a little bit more about what, you said I grew up in a slum and I was a homeless kid, and that's shorthand for you for an awful lot. Could you just unpack that a little bit? What were the conditions like then? And what were the kinds of issues that you dealt with as a child that you now work on day to day?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think I'm doing what I'm doing because of that life experience and knowing that no one will be there for you and being judgmented. You are being told you are poor, you have no voice. And I'll give you an example. One of them is we didn't have health clinic in our community. And I was really so sad, Ambassador, one of my neighbor was dying before we rushed that woman to hospital because there's no. So back I was like, one day we need to have a community hospital in this area. You know what I mean? And then Ambassador, women, my mom, I love my mom. she's still alive, and she never went to school. I think she always thinks if she went to school, she could be the ambassador too. She doesn't she would say that about us, you know. So my mom, really poor woman, got married at the age of 16, had no hope, went through violence. And in my community, women were being beaten. And she taught me gender equity at a very early age. And and if you go to school in the slum, then you see more boys than girls. And I said to myself, one day we're gonna have our school for women in this community. So right now, so for have a school in these communities, you know. So that really gave me think, why is it possible? I think, Ambassador, is because I grew up there, I listened, I passed through it. But the challenge we are facing is that people are not willing to listen. You already judge them, they're uneducated. They don't know what they want. They say that. They don't understand the data. They are wrong. If you really, something I call it community buy-in. Honestly, that's the most powerful. You can go to Harvard, Yale, Wesleyan, but with your ideas, you can sit in DC, but when you come to implement them, if there's no community buy-in, nothing happens. So I went through that live experience. And even Ambassador, I give another example is during this COVID, for example, really shocked me a lot because there is a disconnect. They're telling us wear mask, stay away, and don't go out. Ambassador, believe me, they forgot that people were living in 10 by 10 room where there's no fridge. They share one latrine with other 50 families, and nobody's listening to them. So they feel like, do they really understand what's happening? And I met women who are telling me, Kennedy, I better die from corona than dying from hunger. I mean, so what's that mean? It means that there is no connection. So my role has been really trying to bring these voices. I want to give credit to my government, honestly. I sat on the task force for COVID-19, and I brought these ideas up. And we're able now to start rolling it out. We set up what's called hand washing stations. Why is it possible? Because we brought the voices of the locals to the decision makers. Yeah.
Could I actually stay on COVID for a second, just because, again, everyone watching has their own COVID experience, you know, regardless of where they're watching from. And I've been very struck by the disconnect between public health pronouncements and the lives of people living in very close quarters, whether in Kibera or in other parts of the world. I mean, even in of course, in parts of the United States as well. Prisons, for example, and some inner city communities, maybe not as closely packed, but very difficult to adhere to the guidelines, even if you want to. You mentioned your mother marrying young, and you've made such an investment in girls' education and sought to bring support to that sector all around the world. Because of COVID, you've seen girls give up their studies and enter marriage much earlier than they had intended to. And so you see, I think it's something like 1.3 billion kids not able to attend school. You know, some of them get to do so remotely, but many don't have access to the technology. And then, you know, putting even the public health dimension of COVID to one side, you just see the economic fallout. And so even though I gather in your community, people have made the choice to continue to try to still work, it's much harder to do that when the global economy is shut down and when economic conditions are deteriorating all across your country and all across the continent and all around the world. So I wonder if you could just, that's the sort of macro picture that one reads about. I wonder if you could just describe what understanding that these choices that your neighbors are being forced into are impossible choices. What has COVID done to the development gains that you've been making? Has it been a big blow, or has this community resilience been able to mitigate some of the damage? Could you just talk a little bit about the latest in your community and how people are doing?
Yeah, so this is very interesting, Ambassador. So first of all, when this thing hit the world, and in Kenya especially, is a place whereby if you are poor, I don't know about America, if you are poor, you lose trust with your government. Why are you poor? See? So when they did this COVID, they were like, no, that is a propaganda. You see? And then later on, the government just want money from developed world, for the World Bank. They believe that, I swear to you. So They really didn't connect with it. So, and then they hear all these things that have been said that doesn't make sense to them. So I have to go back to the community and talk to them. And then they're like, but Kennedy, we thought this is a white man disease. You know what I mean? It's only those who live, it's not for Africa. I'm like, no, no, no. So you see that this COVID, honestly, for me, is an eye opener. It has removed a cobweb for us to see reality. It is not equalizer. It has just shown as the ambassador that how our system need to be really mended. It has shown our nakedness. I won't lie to you. I'm so sad to see what's happening in America and in Canada, which I see we care about the world globalization, but now it's becoming nationalism, whereby people just really taking so much, so they forget about this country. So the same thing happening on the ground, whereby people who are really poor are suffering. They were drivers, chef, cooks, nannies, because their job was face to face. They lost it. It was so tough. And then there's something called, which is so sad, happened to us, discrimination. Kibera, the slums are, no, don't go there. They have it, so don't employ them. That was tough. That was really tough. You know what I mean? And so this people really went through a lot. So then where does the solution come in? So I have to talk to the community. What do we do? I told the government and the private sector, they say they'll wear the mask. They say they will try their best. It is all about dignity. It is all about basic needs. They don't have food. Okay? It's the result of the government to provide food. So the government tried to bring in water in, and really amazing to bring in. So I talked the government to another private sector. We brought in something called cash transfer. It worked. They want to build the economy. And what I love about communities is that they love themselves. Nobody want to die. They don't want to kill their neighbors. You know what I mean? So when you give them that tool and support, they'll do it. They don't need science for that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I really saw that's what happened. But I still have some worry as we get vaccine to these countries. We have seen what's happening in the developed countries. I'm scared that we might end up having the poor people not get it, or having what's called the vaccine black market, where you can get fake one. Because when something is, you give a chance for corruption and people to make up fake stuff because it's not there. So I think that's why we need also community to come out together to help them. How do we work on this? Because this cannot be done on just sitting on a table, on a high table somewhere. Yeah.
That's really helpful and really interesting, and especially the question of trust. You mentioned at the outset Ebola and what we did in the Obama administration on Ebola.
Yes. Yeah.
That was the sort of gating issue, was trust and the lack of trust. In rural Guinea, the absolute lack of trust for the central authorities. So when the central authorities said there's Ebola, you have to do safe burial, you have to get tested. They just wanted to do the opposite of what the central government said, because that's what they had learned over time. And I will say in the United States, which is, we have so many more resources and infrastructure, and we're so privileged. We're having this conversation from me from a point of a vantage point of great privilege, but it's trust that has, made us, put us in the horrible situation that we're in, where more than 500,000 people have died of COVID. That did not need to happen, but it was a lack of trust of science, a lack of trust of one another, a lack of trust of the other political party, and it's just devastating to see the human consequences of the erosion of trust. And it's why someone like you, as a messenger, I don't even know if we want to call it a data gatherer, but an experience, as an amalgamator of the experiences of people in your community, being that vehicle where you're trusted by your community, but you've also managed to build up so much trust, with your government interlocutors. That bridging role is essential. Let me ask you a little bit about what I touched upon at the outset and what you've been very adamant about on, which is again what I think is a little bit jargony, this idea of localization. It's almost like saying humanization. Yes, we should. What does local mean? I mean, local just means the place, the place where communities are living and where people long to exercise agency. You mentioned dignity. Dignity can be about means and about having enough food, but it's also about exercising your voice and being heard and being seen. I'm new to some aspects of the development conversation, in the sense that I worked on humanitarian emergencies and on geopolitics and other dimensions of foreign policy. And a lot of what USAID does, I have worked on, but some of these questions, for example, of cash transfers versus other forms of programming, are ones that I'm digging into now in a very deep way. And I wonder if you could just offer a perspective on international development programming, how you have seen over the life of your career, the debates evolve, the approach evolve. I know it hasn't evolved enough from your standpoint, so say a little again about what's left to do. And of course, what's in my mind is this idea of a much more bottom-up approach, of much more support for local actors like yours. What are the tensions in that? What stands in the way, do you think, still at this point? But tell us just what you've seen in terms of how things have changed over your career.
Yes, I honestly, Ambassador, I see there's a lot of hope. I'm a man of hope. I see the future is really getting better, because if you think about, we never used to have this kind of discussion. People were scared to talk about the fact. Truth be told, there is a little bit of colonial mentality in development. You know what I mean? We could talk about that 5 years ago, 10 years ago. You know what I mean? But now, because of the Black Lives Matter, what's happening around the world, COVID was interesting, because COVID also proved to us that community were there supporting each other. Then why can't we invest on them? You know what I mean? So what I'm going to work on is called decolonizing development. You know what I mean? Believing that a dollar will go farther along the way when you invest it to somebody who is living the experience. Okay? So that's the thing I know. And then there's a lot of terms called capacity building, scalability. What is scalability? I believe in scale, but you cannot just use it as a way to deny people of color or Africans who are really doing amazing work and there's an impact. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. So I see this kind of this colonial mentality that has to stop. And for that to happen, Ambassador, you are amazing. How will it happen that people like you talk to us? That's how we're gonna try to bridge this gap. You know what I mean? We need to hear more voices. We're used to the same voices. You know what I mean? And even in the US, as you can see during all this thing, we see more people of color suffering more compared even who run the organizations compared to their fellow. So yeah. So the first thing is to accept there's a problem. So let's say I'm the one running something big. So I'll be like, okay, do we believe in rural? Do we believe in grassroots movements? Yes. Then why are we not supporting them? Okay, we start from we start digging from there. What is happening? I want to know what's happening. Why are we not supporting them? And then why can we not support them? If you remember, Ambassador, during colonization, they used the word, no, African countries cannot manage themselves. We have to colonize them. So they will tell you the same thing. No, they don't understand the data. Then they don't understand this. So we're like, no way. If we want real change, we have to be radical on it. We have to listen to those voices. That's why I'm so happy to hear the voices of over 150 young leaders across the globe who are joining us to talk about their voices, to be heard, and to see how we can bring this systematical change in our communities.
And so the debate is happening in a different way and in more mainstream circles and with fewer inhibitions now than 5 years ago, like you said.
Yes.
What you talked about COVID not being an equalizer, as it has been spoken about, but rather being, and I feel like this is the best phrase, capital G, capital R, the great revealer, right?
Yeah, the great revealer.
The great revealer. I mean, not great in a positive sense, but just exposing the disparities and inequities and injustices, and just shining a brighter spotlight and having the human toll be much more out in front. At the same time, in many communities, it has brought out tremendous solidarity. And I wonder if you could speak about sort of the bright spots in your community, the kinds of things that you think can be scaled, or the things that we can take out of, and it need not be over the course of the pandemic, but in general, what can people like me who don't live in Kibera learn from the energy and commitment and successes of people in your community? What are the bright spots?
Yes, so I think one of them is the resiliency is amazing. These people don't give up. I'm like, wow, despite all this, they want to carry each other. And something that I've seen that happened through COVID is the government of Kenya were willing to listen more. So now they're building roads. We talked to them. They came in like, wow, this was, so without COVID, I'm sorry to say this, it seemed they could never care about it. But now because of COVID, it really became attention. Now they know there's no roads, there's no sewage, there are all these things. The government, President Uhuru Kenyatta is now building more health centers in the slums that I think will never happen without COVID. And another thing that for me, that's very powerful. So we have also seen the inequality that was existing. You also seen during COVID, Ambassador, people became billionaires. So the gap is big, and we have seen that we are not equal, and we never talked about it until COVID. So really, this for me has really brought a lot of conversation that we have to start action on them. And the last one is, did communities around the world who are local organizations, local leaders, did something amazing? Yes. So for me, if you're looking for data, that's the real data now. They did it. When big organizations were running away because of COVID, they were scared. They were all going back to their countries. You know what I mean? Locals keep on working hard, and they did it. And we should recognize that, and we should support them because they did it. Yeah,
that's great, Kennedy. Well, we're wrapping up here, and I just want to thank you for all the work you do, all the inspiration you give to so many, not only for what you do for the people of your community, but how you inspire change in other communities, how other local leaders learn from you, how people like me learn from you. Even here in the United States, we now are doing something with our recent Recovery Act that nobody thought possible, which is actually give families who have children support. And it's actually incredible that for the first time, we're going to see a mother, a low-income person, get $300 a month because they have a child under 6. And if they have 3 children under 6, they'll get $900 a month for the next year. And so I think everybody has a chance out of this horrific crisis to experiment, to see people who've been left behind and have been and felt unseen for too long. And I think you and your community are showing the way. So I'm so grateful to talk to you now of all times, and I look forward to working together going forward.
And Ambassador, I cannot wait to have you meet my communities and come to Kenya. We look forward for that. And I'll see you when they come to DC. So I'm so happy. And thank you so much for doing the world.
Thank you.
Thank you.